One of India's strengths, as we mentioned, is its diaspora. Indian Americans make up more than 1% of the US population. That's over 4 million people. Seems like a small number, but its influence should not be underestimated because this is a very important segment of the American society. Socially, economically, and increasingly politically. And the White House knows this. As Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi lands in Washington, D.C., Indians in America will be keenly watching and participating in the events. What does this visit mean for them? What are their expectations? We spoke to some members of the Indian community in Washington, D.C. to bring you this ground report. When Prime Minister Modi met President Biden last month, the American leader had a complaint. He said Modi was too popular. Biden told Modi he was making preparations for a grand reception in Washington and he'd run out of tickets a month before the event because the Indian leader was too popular. That popularity was on display again. On Sunday, unity marches were held in 20 American cities. Members of the Indian diaspora showed up in large numbers. It was their way to welcome the Indian Prime Minister. We're at the Washington Memorial where the Indian American community has gathered to conduct a unity march to welcome Prime Minister Modi. Such marches are being held in at least 20 cities across the United States. And this is the community's way of welcoming the Indian Prime Minister. This is a 4 million strong community we're talking about. They form about 1% of the US population, and as a congressman recently pointed out, they pay 6% of the taxes in America. This is a very constructive community that the Prime Minister has engaged with. He's known for his engagements with the diaspora across the world, and in a way he started this tradition here in the United States with his event, the mega event that he held in 2014 at New York's Madison Square Gardens. That was in 2014 when Modi visited the US for the first time as Prime Minister. 19,000 people turned up to see him. The crowd waved and chanted his name. The Prime Minister's face was beamed on a giant screen, even painted on canvas live. In the years since, the engagement with the diaspora has continued, and the support base seems to have grown.
भव्य होने, विशाल होने, ये टेक्सास के स्वभाव में है.
In 2019, Modi addressed an even bigger rally in Houston. It was called the Howdy Modi event. 50,000 people attended, including then US President Donald Trump. This week will be his 8th visit as Prime Minister. He'll address the US Congress for the second time, the only Indian Prime Minister to be invited for a joint sitting twice. For the diaspora, it's a matter of pride.
Modi Saab and Biden together, we hope that the friendship lasts a very long time and we bring peace to the world solutions, and the two great leaders meeting is a very, very good thing.
Our Indian diaspora already benefited. Our students especially, a long waiting green card, we got some relief in green card.
But with a large fan base comes the weight of expectations too. The Indian diaspora is keenly watching this trip. Their expectations have grown with their support. They look to the Prime Minister to address their concerns, to promote Indian interests in America, and to strengthen their bond with India.
So heartening to see so much enthusiasm and just energy. You feel it around. And
I'd say fantastic enthusiasm, and it's a great participation from a different part of India. And it was great to see how people are so galvanizing this march for a peace, and hope all this partnership, India and US partnership, can bring up a great solution for a globally peace.
The US says this visit is a transformative one. Washington wants a deeper relationship with New Delhi, and a key factor in that will be these people. Their support can propel the India-US relationship. Let's come back to the visit. Here in Washington, D.C., you feel like the US is romancing Narendra Modi. A state visit, a lavish dinner, a throng of people, all of it makes for a great event and headlines. But that is only the highlight reel. There's a long backstory too, and like all love stories, this too had its twists and turns. Let me start with a picture. This is from the year 1994, where a much younger Narendra Modi stands outside the White House. He'd been invited by the American Council of Young Political Leaders. It's a non-profit organization. Clad in a simple cotton kurta, he stands along with some other political leaders, probably oblivious of how his America story will unfold. About a decade later, that story takes an unexpected turn. Modi's visa is revoked in the year 2005. He's banned from entering the United States of America. Why? Over the Gujarat riots of 2002, where he was acquitted by Indian courts but held guilty by the Americans. Like all things, this too passed. Within the next decade, things began to change and change dramatically for Narendra Modi. His political star rose, as did his profile on the world stage. You could say Modi's rags to riches story mirrors the phenomenal rise of India. It is now the world's fastest growing major economy, a digital powerhouse, the most populous nation, and the largest democracy. The Modi story took a turn in the year 2014. He led his party, the Bharatiya Janata Party, to a landslide victory in the general election. He became the Prime Minister of India. And within a few months, this is what happened. Prime Minister Narendra Modi made his first triumphant visit to the United States. He had a private dinner with President Obama. He toured the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial with the President. He received a rally fit for a rock star at Madison Square Garden, with 19,000 cheering members of the Indian diaspora. This marks the beginning of America's budding romance with Modi, which grew with each visit over the years. But this week's visit, his eighth, could be historic and path-breaking because this is his first state visit to the US. He's only the third Indian leader to do so, to come on a state visit to America. During his tenure of 9 years, this is the 12th time Modi will address the legislature in a foreign country. This is the highest number of times for any Indian Prime Minister till date, much higher than what his predecessors achieved during their respective tenures. Dr. Manmohan Singh addressed foreign legislatures 7 times in his 10-year tenure. Indira Gandhi 4 times, Nehru thrice, Rajiv Gandhi and Atal Bihari Vajpayee twice, and former Prime Ministers like Morarji Desai and Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao only once. And specifically talking about addressing the US legislature, former Prime Ministers have done so too, including Nehru, Rajiv Gandhi, P.V. Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh. But Prime Minister Modi will become the only Indian PM to address the US Congress for the second time. And this is testimony not only of Narendra Modi's rising influence, but also of India's growing stature on the world stage. Modi has single-handedly changed the political landscape of India. There is unwavering determination towards progress, with development as a key driver. So it's no surprise that America is going all out to partner with India. And only a decade ago, few anticipated that Modi would become such an ardent champion of stronger ties with the United States, that he would go on from being persona non grata to Prime Minister and America's state guest. The United States became a democracy in the 1700s, one of the world's oldest democracies. India joined the club almost 200 years later. But India made long strides. Today, it is the world's largest democracy and a thriving, robust force. New Delhi and Washington are more than 12,000 kilometers apart, but they have more in common than you would imagine. Today, we'll explore that. From the National Mall in Washington, D.C. and the Central Vista in New Delhi, how 2 vibrant seats of democracy are linked by a single thread: the ability to evolve and represent their nation. Our next report brings you the tale of the 2 capitals. Behind me is the US Capitol building. It is part of what is called the front yard of America, the National Mall, home to the most iconic buildings in the country, also the seat of the US Congress. The entire expanse is a reflection of a confident country. But how was it born? I have a story to tell you. A tale of two capitals, Washington, D.C. and New Delhi. One symbolizes the world's oldest democracy, the other is home to the world's largest democracy. Both capitals are separated by distance but united by shared values and some history. Our story begins in Washington, D.C. The year was 1775, the US Revolution had just ended, and the Americans wanted to create a new identity for themselves, something that breaks away from their past of the British colonial rule. George Washington was the president, and he had a plan. He picked the land himself. He passed something called the Resident Act that helped create the US Capitol and the President's House, which is the seat of the US government. And for this, he handpicked a civil engineer. It was this man, Pierre Charles L'Enfant. He designed the first plans for the city of Washington, D.C., inspired by the Champs-Élysées in Paris. He visualized Washington from scratch, a grand city with wide avenues, public squares, and buildings that inspire, within a district of hills, forests, and greenery. What L'Enfant did not know then was this. His vision would inspire another democracy over 200 years later. India, yet another democracy emerging from the shadow of its colonial past. A few years back, India launched a major project, the Central Vista Project, an attempt to decolonize India's capital. When Edward Lutyens and Herbert Baker built New Delhi, they too were inspired by L'Enfant's designs. But the old Central Vista was made to serve the British. The India of the 21st century needed an upgrade. The new Central Vista aims to represent a new India with a brand new parliament building and a central secretariat to house all ministries. Also a revamped boulevard now called the Kartavya Path, or the Path of Duty. This is India's new Central Vista, and its similarities with the National Mall in Washington are striking. Both are iconic spaces, featuring grand and expansive buildings, imbued with deep symbolism. Each monument on the National Mall represents a part of America's history. In New Delhi, the India Gate and the National War Memorial evoke a sense of national pride. And the new parliament represents the rich tradition of democracy in India. This was a radical change for India, much debated, as most decisions are in a robust democracy. But such changes are part of the story for Washington's National Mall. It has undergone many such transformations. It has been rebuilt, burned, extended, and restored many times. The architectural revamp did not alter the core of America's democratic foundations. India's Central Vista project is no different. It's an attempt to revamp the democratic spaces of a confident country, a country that sees itself as a lot more than a former British colony. And it is proof that democracies need to evolve. Whether it be the National Mall behind me or the Central Vista in New Delhi, they show that democracies need to be in tune with the times to truly reflect the countries they represent. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Indonesia and SpaceX have launched a telecommunications satellite. This project is worth over $500 million. It aims to provide internet access to remote corners of Indonesia. In the United States, a huge funnel cloud formed over a town in Oklahoma amid tornado warnings. We'll show you a time-lapse video. In Germany, a Spanish motorcycle racer crashed for the 5th time during a warm-up race. And finally, what makes the 19th of June significant? We're taking you back in history. In 1865, Texas, it's a state in America, on this day, a group of enslaved African Americans learned that they were free from slavery. Their president was Abraham Lincoln. Over 2 years back, he had signed a landmark law. It's called the Emancipation Proclamation. It was meant to free all the slaves. This day is also called Juneteenth. It's a federal holiday here in the US. We're leaving you with this. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow from Washington, D.C.
Stage 1, propulsion is nominal. vehicle is pitching downrange.